Hey class, all right, this is next review video for Thursday's exam. This one is going to be on Great Britain, so let's get after it here. Okay, first of all, the United Kingdom is what consists of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. When we are talking about Great Britain, this does not include Northern Ireland. If you hopefully remember that very, very rapid pace video that explained this in tremendous detail. All right, the United Kingdom is a parliamentary democracy and there is a monarch. The Queen is considered the head of state, and the Prime Minister is considered the head of government. So, what is the difference? The Queen is really ceremonial, it's more of a figurehead. Her primary responsibility is to receive foreign ambassadors, whereas the Prime Minister is the head of government, and the current Prime Minister is Theresa May. She appoints cabinet ministers and is also the leader of the majority party in Parliament. The Church of England is the established religion, and the monarch's role as the official head of the Church of England is what gives the monarch legitimacy. Okay, there was going to be votes for the members of Parliament, which we will explain in a second. Parliament has two houses, the House of Commons and the House of Lords. It is the House of Commons that the people elect, whereas the House of Lords are hereditary and appointed positions. There is no single written constitution. There's just a series of laws that guide how the government operates. Okay, I gave you one slide for a very brief history. After World War II, the idea of a collective consensus emerged so that both parties, Labor and Conservatives, wanted to work together to help the nation rebuild and recover. They really agreed that the government should provide for these services for people, including healthcare. Then in the 1970s, an economic crisis made it difficult for them to be able to follow through on those commitments. And at the end of the decade, the Conservative Party came to power in 1979, and that led to Thatcherism. Margaret Thatcher, who is kind of considered the equivalent of Ronald Reagan in the United States, she tried to balance the budget, she cut programs, and she strengthened defense. In 1997, Tony Blair became the prime minister, and his new Labour Party was looking for a third way. In other words, something in the middle of the collective consensus, which was providing tremendous services to people, and the rise of Thatcher, which was cutting those programs. And then more recently, David Cameron became the prime minister in 2010, but he is no longer the prime minister because he agreed to call for the Brexit referendum vote. And when that vote led to Britain voting to leave the European Union, he agreed to leave as prime minister. And the current prime minister is Theresa May. The end of this video is going to focus all on Brexit because I have to think that's going to be something that they ask you this year. Okay, the concept of Oxbridge. So many of these people are either from Oxford or Cambridge University, so it's an unofficial title that they use. It's probably 75% of the House of Commons and might even be even higher for the cabinet members. What are these political parties? So you have the Labour Party, which gets most of its votes from urban and industrial areas. That is the more liberal party. Scotland and Wales tend to be the more liberal areas of the UK. Poor and working class people will vote for Labour. The current head of Labour is Jeremy Corbyn. Keep that in mind because if Theresa May is ever ousted and Labour takes over, he would become the Prime Minister. You might remember some controversial aspects of him. The non-controversial aspects, he's probably similar to a Bernie Sanders, but those of you that remember in class, we talked about some of his other problems. Conservative Party gets more of its support from the rural and the suburban areas. That would be England as well. That's going to be wealthier people, and Theresa May is the head of the Conservative Party, and that is why she is the Prime Minister, because they formed a coalition, but I'll explain that in a second. The Liberal Democrats are the more centrist party. When David Cameron was prime minister, he formed a coalition with them. UKIP is the United Kingdom Independence Party. That is a far-right party that was dedicated to the Brexit vote. The leader used to be Nigel Farage. He has since left and actually now formed his own party, which is called the Brexit Party. Then there is the Democratic Unionist Party, which is from Northern Ireland, And this is the party that Theresa May formed a coalition with. Might as well just explain this now. If nobody receives a majority, and then somebody in the House of Commons, they have to form a coalition. They have to join together. So they have to make an agreement that will lead to somebody becoming the prime minister. And sometimes it's an odd arrangement that is made. Some other parties that you could use, the Change UK party actually just formed a couple of months ago. That's a party that's trying to keep Great Britain in the European Union. And then the Plaid Cymru party is one of the parties that's calling for the independence of Wales. Okay, so now we get to these elections. So the only national elections that people vote for in Great Britain are for the members of Parliament, specifically the House of Commons. They use what is called a first past the post system. So there are 650 districts all throughout Great Britain, and each one will elect one member of Parliament. Whoever gets the most votes wins that seat. So this often leads, it's a winner-take-all system, but this often could lead to two parties dominating and making it more difficult for third parties to get any seats. Now, before 2011, the elections to the House of Commons were irregular. Then in 2011, they set a fixed-term parliament. They passed a fixed-term Parliament Act. So now every 5 years there must be an election. The Prime Minister can select an election earlier or call for an election earlier. Sometimes they call them snap elections. But there's actually a debate on whether or not that could actually happen. If they want to have an election earlier than 5 years, it'll happen if there's a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister, or if there's a two-thirds vote in the House of Commons. And that could happen during this BREXIT controversy. All right, I hope you understand the Prime Minister is selected by the majority party in the House of Commons, and if nobody gets a majority, they have to form a coalition. I went through the first past the post. Campaigns are very short in Great Britain, much shorter than they are in the United States, so they don't have as much of a time to discuss about politics, but they also are very committed to their political parties. All right, so what are the powers of the House of Commons? House of Commons, they can make laws, they can pass bills, they conduct votes of no confidence, they can debate the issues, they represent the people, and they pass a budget. All right, the majority party would have to ask the Prime Minister to step down without calling for a new election. That would be a vote of no confidence. On Wednesday at 12 p.m., they have what's called question time, where they're able to ask the Prime Minister anything they'd like. And the Speaker of the House of Commons is John Bercow. This is not necessarily a position most people would be familiar with in the United States. However, he has gotten a lot of media attention for his way of saying order. It's his job to maintain order, and the debates over Brexit have been quite fierce. Throw his name in there if you get a chance on the part two. He does not take part in the debate, though, or in the voting. All right. The role of the media. There's really a deep divide of the media in Great Britain. You have some very high-quality news sources, and then you have some really sensationalized tabloid papers. The BBC, which some of you might know from television shows you watch in the United States, it's strictly regulated by the government, so they are not allowed to be political, cannot sell any advertising for political reasons. Citizens in Britain, they're probably more private with their views, but they do identify with a political party at a very high rate. And it's really part of their culture that they feel as if they have an obligation to take part in elections. Okay, the Judiciary. This might surprise you, but the Supreme Court in Great Britain was not founded until 2005. It is now the final court of appeals, and they do have judicial review. So this serves as a check on Parliament in Great Britain. They focus on human and civil rights, civil liberties. So the idea of devolution, which I'm going to explain in the next slide, when they give more power to local levels of government, any disputes between the two would be settled by the Supreme Court. And then this is a little confusing. So the court was created to try to enhance legitimacy for the government. But if the court had a conflict with the European Union court, it would be the European Union law that would supersede UK law. But now, with the uncertainty of Brexit, I'm not sure if that's taking place. Devolution. Devolution is when we give more power to the local levels of government. So remember, Great Britain is a unitary system. Most of the power resides in the federal or the central level, but they do now have a Scottish Parliament and they do have a Welsh Assembly. And if Brexit does go through, well, I'll save that for later. Okay. They also have now allowed the mayor, another one of my mistakes here, apologize. The mayor of London is now elected directly by the people. That used to not be the case. And Parliament's sovereignty in Great Britain has been challenged, obviously, by devolution. Okay, social welfare. So whenever the government provides programs for people, that's considered part of the welfare state. They have a universal health care system. It is a single-payer system, National Health Service, run by the government. Everybody who lives there has health insurance through this system. They have higher taxes than we do. That's what pays for this. Concerns are that as the nation gets older, the costs are going to rise and they may need to increase taxes or make cuts in services. This was a big part of the Brexit debate. I'll explain that later. Just be aware, some people think that the health system in Great Britain is not as good as ours. Others think it is. Some people think there are longer wait lines. They don't have good dental care. Other people believe that the system provides for everybody, unlike in the United States, where there are still millions of people who do not have health insurance. And other programs that they have family leave for parents, subsidized housing, which we have as well, inexpensive college, which we don't have right now, and programs for the homeless. All right, domestic issues. Colonialism has shaped Great Britain, and they do have a multi-ethnic society, but there is a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment, which also contributed to the Brexit vote. Great Britain has been the victim of terrorism. There were bombings at 4 different transportation sites on July 7th, 2005, and Scotland, the airport was bombed there in 2007. Great Britain has a history of conflict, Ireland and Northern Ireland, but I don't know if they'd go that far back for the exam. Great Britain responded to the recent terrorist acts with much greater surveillance on the streets, video cameras, and sending troops, obviously, to other countries to fight. All right, so now we get to Brexit. So I really feel like they have to ask you about this. It's so important. So let's see how well I can do on this. All right, so on June 23rd, 2016, Prime Minister David Cameron, he said this 3 years earlier. He said, if you want a referendum on leaving the European Union, I'll call for it. So he listened to the people, and he really believed that they were going to vote to stay in the European Union. And he even said, if you don't, then obviously I will leave as Prime Minister. So the vote takes place, and what's the big debate? Should we remain or should they leave the European Union? So what is the European Union? Well, it's a collection of several different countries that tried to create one common market, that they would have free access to travel without having to worry about borders. They also wanted everybody to have the same currency. They have the same judicial system. There is actually a parliament as well in the European Union. And what has happened is 19 of the nations use the euro. They almost all of them are part of the same common market, and almost all of them have the open borders. I'm not going to get into too much detail about that right now. But the vote was unbelievably narrow. So 51.9% of the voters chose to leave, 48.1% said to remain. Over 70% of the population did vote. The English and Wales vote was mostly to leave, while the Scottish and the Northern Irish vote was primarily to remain. Now, what were these issues that people were really concerned about? As far as I know, there were 2 big issues. The first one is that people thought that if they left, a lot of money would then be devoted to the National Health Service. So that was one of the reasons why people voted to leave the European Union. It has come to people's attention that nowhere near the amount of money is going to go to the NHS as they thought. Now, another reason, there was a major refugee crisis in Europe that was unfolding at this time. And the open borders concept was a concern to some people. So those are probably the 2 big reasons why people voted to leave. But since then, this is now 3 years later, they still have not been able to negotiate an exit plan. It's not as easy as maybe people had thought. So what is that problem? Well, they were supposed to leave by March 29th, but they missed that deadline. And Theresa May has come under enormous pressure and scrutiny as a result of it. Now, one of the terms that people in the media are using are, should we have a hard Brexit or should we have a soft Brexit? I should stop saying we, I don't live there. So the hard Brexit people, that means leave the European Union completely, no side deals, Great Britain is done, and sets everything up on its own. A soft Brexit would allow Great Britain to stay in the single trade market and allow for some free movement of people across borders. But Parliament just has not been able to pass either deal. The primary conflict has been the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. So I told you there was a history of conflict there, and they finally came to a peace settlement. They called it the Good Friday Agreement, and that ended, for the most part, the violence between Ireland and Northern Ireland. So now if they put a physical border between those two, because remember, the Republic of Ireland is still in the European Union. So now if they put a physical border there, that could jeopardize the agreement. So that's one major issue. Theresa May said maybe we can just put checkpoints up at the border. She calls our plan a backstop, but they just haven't been able to vote in favor of that. So I hope I did a decent job explaining Brexit. The new deadline is Halloween 2019, so my class next year will have a lot to look forward to see if that happens. Some people think, why don't they just have a second referendum? But that has not been supported yet. Okay, so there's my Great Britain review. Good luck, everyone, and I will see you for the next one.